Hey guys, what's up? Today we're joined by Judo sensation Gary Ledger. He's going to talk to us about training with some of the UFC guys like GSP and Chris Weidman, getting them ready for their fights, as well as what you can do as a BJJ practitioner, whether you're doing gi or no gi, to help with those takedowns.
You're the man right now.
Oh, trying, man, trying. It's a fucking grind.
Oh my God, it's a grind.
It takes a city. The hard part about doing a podcast, it's not specific to like just one thing, right? It's like when I do jiu-jitsu, like I've had crypto people on, everyone's like, no, fuck the crypto guys. When I have crypto people on, although they're all like, fuck the jiu-jitsu guys. It's like, so you gotta like stay in your own lane. I'm like, it's my highway. I'm gonna go in whatever fucking lane I want to be in. But so how did you get started doing judo? You were 8 years old, you had a twin brother.
Yeah. You know what happened? It was kind of interesting. My parents were the ones that were at work all the time, and they were looking for a place to put us in, and living in Brooklyn, New York, it was just one of those things where you have to find something for your kids, after school program, whatever the case may be. And it was fun. All the kids that were in my neighborhood, they all did judo. It was an after school program that kind of just clicked immediately. So what can I say?
So you started just as like kind of like a glorified daycare. Mom was like, I got to find something for these kids to do.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Were you like a rambunctious kid? Sometimes when kids are like getting in trouble, they're like, we got to find a creative outlet for these guys. Or were you a good kid growing up?
No, actually we weren't. We were just kids that were just like, any normal kid. And what can I say? It was just one of those things where, how can I put it? The neighborhood that we were in wasn't the best neighborhood, but we had a lot of support.
What part
I can honestly say that. What can I say? I can honestly say that a lot of the students that were in the neighborhood where I lived was in East New York. It was called Starrett City. So all the buildings looked the same. It was one of the biggest housing complexes in all of the United States, actually. And clean neighborhood, but you always had those knuckleheads anywhere you went. So
yeah. So you got started doing judo at 8 years old and living in Brooklyn. At what point did you like decide that this is like the career path I wanted to go? Because judo's you had a lot of success in judo. Did you start competing at a young age?
Actually, yeah, I started competing immediately almost. I started when I was 8 years old, and like I was saying, the neighborhood that I grew up in, it was just one of those things where, there was plenty of activities, but I think our sport, the after school program that we had just catered to everything, community, competitions, going on trips. It wasn't like all the other activities in the school or in the neighborhood, I should say. And what can I say? When I was 8 years old, jumped into my first competition. I started at 8 years old. I was in my first competition at 8 years old.
Wow.
And then, and by the time I was 10 years old, I had already been to up and down the East Coast, going to all these different competitions. And then by the time I was 12, I had already competed in Puerto Rico, Barbados, going to all these different locations. And then it grew, going to the West Coast, then finally going to South America. So it was fun, and it was more than just fighting. It was a good environment. People always took good care of us, and I really enjoyed that.
Did judo bring you full circle to meet Renzo Gracie and get into jiu-jitsu?
So the story is, when my brother and I were in college, I ended up I was still teaching kids, and my brother, he was still in school, so he was getting ready to graduate from college. During his off time, he would go take up jiu-jitsu. We had a friend of ours that was taking judo at the time in Long Island City in Queens, and he ended up, the guy ended up inviting him to go do a jiu-jitsu class. My brother fell in love with it. He tried to get me to go as well, and I didn't go because I was just focused on teaching kids, and I finally had graduated from college. I wanted to get a job in the field that I, got into, television, radio, but what can I say? It kind of sucked. So it didn't work out for me. Like I did it for 2.5 years. And then he invited me. He was just like, hey, now that you quit your job, why don't you come check this out? This jiu-jitsu stuff is pretty good, and it'll probably help us out with our judo. And I jumped on it immediately. So
how long were you doing judo before you did your first jiu-jitsu class?
Almost 17 years.
Okay, so you were like well established, had done tournaments. What was the biggest? I mean, I think that if you're familiar with both, right? Like 90% of judo is throws, 10% on the ground, and I think that it's easily cross jiu-jitsu the opposite, right? 90% on the ground, and fundamentally, I think that we lack a lot of judo throws. What was some of the parallels that you saw when you went to your first jiu-jitsu class? Was it love at first sight, or was it like you just tossing everyone around their head, and then what was that like?
Yeah, a little bit of that.
A little bit of that. He said, "How do I answer this in a nice manner?" Yes, like get some frequent flyer miles on some guys. So, when you were training judo, was it always in the gi? Because there's been people, Carl Parisian, Ronda Rousey. There's been my gosh, her name's eluding me, in PFL Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah, Kayla Harrison. Yeah,
Kayla Harrison that have translated well.
So it translated very well. There were times where we would do stuff in no gi as well, but when it came to competition, it was always in the gi, and the transitions were fairly easy. I think being a part of having that longevity in judo for quite some time, the translation was fairly easy. The one thing that I had to get used to was not turtling up and not giving up my back. Mm. When you look at both sports, judo and jiu-jitsu, there are pros and cons to it. What I like to call it is, you have your sport judo and street judo. Then you have your sport jiu-jitsu, street jiu-jitsu. So there's certain things that you wouldn't do, right? So, if you turtle up in the street, you're getting kicked. You're gonna get your ass whooped. But in judo, you can safely do that. You're not going to get your ass whooped, right? But when you make those translations and you go into jiu-jitsu, if you turtle up, somebody's taking your back, they're putting their hooks in, they're going to sink in and choke. That's it. It's game over. Same thing.
In judo, there's a time limit, right? Once you hit the ground, how long do you have? Is it like 10 seconds or something to do
niwaza? Actually, there isn't a time limit.
There isn't? So you can stay on the ground the whole time?
So what happens is it's based on the discretion of the referee. So if they recognize that you're going towards an actual technique or you're working towards something, then eventually they're going to let you keep on working. But if the referee doesn't know shit, then, they're going to sit there and be like, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to call mate. Mate means stop. They're going to stand you back up. I remember going to a competition, the New York Open. It was a very high level competition in New York City. And while I was competing there, I remember Jimmy Pedro, who was Kayla's coach and Rhonda's coach and Travis Stevens' coach. I remember watching him compete, and he went down to the ground, and they almost let him work for 45 seconds. I'm sitting there like looking at the referee. It's like the referee's not going to say anything. They're in love with the ground game right now. So watching that go on, it made me have a different appreciation for working on the ground.
So when you started training jiu-jitsu, were you splitting like doing judo and jiu-jitsu, or were you kind of like, I have enough judo, let me focus full-time on jiu-jitsu now?
I actually was splitting a little bit of both. For my weight class, I competed at 198 pounds. So for that particular weight class, I also was walking around at 185. So I gave up a lot of weight. The reason why is because my brother was in the weight class below me. So being an identical twin, if we wanted to make any teams, well, we're going to end up having to fight each other. So I ended up switching up, moving up a weight class, tried to put on the weight, wouldn't stay on, but the strength and the speed maintained. So I kept it up. But what I also realized is that there were people that were so heavy, physically stronger than I was. I knew that I needed to exploit a weakness that a lot of judo guys have, and that's the ground game. So I figured, why don't I just start implementing a little bit of that jiu-jitsu game, whatever I knew in jiu-jitsu, and start trying to implement it into my ground game for judo. And, it was giving me a lot of success. I think back about how many matches I've had in the past where the guy's ground game sucked. And if I knew how to just get it down to the ground, I probably would have been able to, get that win. I probably would have been up maybe 20-30% more matches I would have won from that position.
So the people that have had success transitioning into MMA, like Carl Parigi and Ronda Rousey, how come you don't think we see more? Because they had a lot of success, and I've always said that like the Achilles heel to a good striker is a good grappler, Achilles heel to a good jiu-jitsu guy is a wrestler, and typically the guys that I saw beat wrestlers a lot were the really good judo guys. It's a different approach to the throws and stuff, and using that momentum. How come you think we don't see more judo players in the MMA space?
Well, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that and I think this is actually, maybe they do realize this. A lot of jiu-jitsu guys realize how dangerous judo really is. At the competitive level, a lot of the competitors, they stop competing at the high level between the range of like 25 to like 32. It's too much punishment, just like constantly the pounding of taking on the ground over and over and over, going to high level competitions, seeing guys' knees beat up, shoulders destroyed. And for them to jump into another high level sport, some of them are kind of like, you know what, I don't feel like getting beat up anymore. I had my stint where I thought I wanted to give it a try. I wanted to try MMA. Maybe about 4 years ago, I tried to do my first amateur fight. And it felt good. It felt good to prepare for competition. It felt good to do all these things. But I realized how much time I put into doing judo. And a lot of those competitors, just like myself, we started very young. So there's years and years of punishment that people don't see. Like you look at a guy like Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo has been wrestling for a long time. I remember seeing him at the Olympics, little guy struggling to make the weight. And then now you look at him, he's retired from MMA. He decided to take a step back, whether it's financial or not. The guy has injuries that he probably doesn't even talk about.
What are some of the worst injuries you've seen in judo? Guys getting like tossed on their heads? Is that the biggest fear? Like neck injuries?
Oh, I know people that have been paralyzed actually.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, partially paralyzed. I've seen guys, disc messed up from bad falls. I remember, even for myself, I remember I was in Budapest competing at one of the Olympic qualifiers, and a guy went in for a fireman's carry, and I tried to cartwheel out the technique, but he locked up my arm so tight. I tried to spin out the technique, and when I spinned out the technique, my pec tore. Oh. And my shoulder was already in bad shape before that. So I never got the surgery for it. I got a hole in my chest right now.
Oh, geez.
But yeah, later on, it just kind of, the damage just kept on building up, ended up tearing my bicep tendon. And it's just a lot of years of just wear and tear. That's what happens.
When you had the one MMA fight, was it ever something you think you would do again?
Well, I ended up never getting the MMA fight because so many people end up dropping out. I had maybe about four people drop out on me. And I think this is a different day and age when you have information, information's at your fingertips. If you don't know anything, you can look it up, very simple, and back then it was, okay, let me look this up. Oh, okay, I want to fight this guy. He's 0-0. Maybe I might have a chance. And people just take a chance and they'll go step into the cage. Now you're in the year 2000, 2010, 2020, and all it takes is go to Google and you can look someone up and find out, oh, they're 0-0 in MMA, but they have 100, 200 matches in kickboxing, 200 matches in judo, something like that. So, it's you're better off either going straight pro because you have that competition experience. So there's a big difference between those two things. It's one thing to be aware of the sport, but also having the competition mindset to be available to compete in the sport. So that mindset is important.
Did you ever train with John Danaher?
Oh, John Danaher is my guy.
Yeah. What was from a judo perspective? How's John's judo? Because he's always speaking Japanese for jiu-jitsu terms for stuff we have American names for already.
So John, when I first met John, he knew about matches that I was actually at. So he is a special human being. Very, very special. I remember he was the one that actually gave me my my brown belt, and then he wasn't around because he had surgery on, I believe, on his hip or his knee, and Renzo ended up giving me my black belt. So I stayed with John John was my instructor for the better half of 5 years. So, there were times where I remember him calling me over to the sidelines after he finished teaching a technique, and he's like, "Hey, Gary, come over here. Did you see this in the Tokyo Grand Slam? Oh my God, that was insane." He's breaking down matches with me. Like, he knows his judo. He does his research. He teaches the techniques. He knows it. In my opinion, I think he knows more judo than some of the judo black belts that are out there now.
Wow. Yeah, I had Gary Tonin on, and Gary was saying that John's his like MMA and striking coach, and people don't understand, like, because John's become so prolific from just the jiu-jitsu and the Danaher Death Squad. People don't realize, like, he's like an encyclopedia of all martial arts. Like, he's really good at boxing. He's great at judo. He's got the philosophical background to really break things down, and that wonderful New Zealand soft accent to make you listen to it sultry.
Yeah. Yep, that's him.
The sultries. So you were training with John when GSP was there for some of his fights then?
Yeah. So I didn't get a chance to. I did train with George for quite some time, like whenever he would come into New York. But my brother actually trained with John and George for a good while. My brother actually helped George St. Pierre for the Carlos Condit fight, I believe. Mm-hmm. And he was going up there to Montreal, maybe about. He was going up there for, I think, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. They were going all the time. And I remember asking my brother this question. I was like, so you've been around John for this long, and you guys were actually roommates. How much do you know about John now? You guys been together for 8 weeks. He says, I don't know a thing.
Quiet guy, right? Like, I know that he wears rash guards everywhere.
Everywhere. That is John right there.
There's an infamous story about John going to somebody's wedding and wore a rash guard at the wedding. Like, if there's one place you're not going to wear a spandex top, it would probably be a wedding. But no, it's John, man. He loves those rash guards.
He loves rash guards.
So what's it like when you guys were training with GSP? Was that just was that stand up to takedown? Was it takedown and ground and pound?
Oh, it was a lot of groundwork. By then, we had already had quite a bit of knowledge for jiu-jitsu. So, whatever challenge we can present to George, that kind of worked. But the main training camp that we worked on, my brother and I, were for the first Anderson Silva camp, actually. So, for the Chris Weidman versus Anderson Silva.
Okay.
So, yeah, that one was a good one.
That's the one. That's the first one. That's where Anderson broke his shin bone, right?
No, the first one was actually when Chris Weidman knocked him out.
And then it's right. And then the second one was when he broke the shin bone. That's crazy, because those are two, like, a win is a win, right? But like, it's, some people can discount because, there's a lucky punch and then there's a random break. But man, that's such a crazy, like, Anderson Silva was such a dominant athlete for so many years. God, yeah. I mean, he was just like insanely head and shoulders above the top guys.
Oh, easily. I'm sitting there like, I'm not going to, truth of the matter is, I'm sitting there helping Chris Weidman out, but I'm like, man, he's dealing with a world beater right here. Yeah. This guy,
like, I don't want to be you.
Yeah, I know. Like, but I believed in Chris. He's a special athlete, another guy that, you show him something and he'll try to implement it the same day that he learned it. And he would be successful at it. But when we were doing the camp, John used to present these wild things to him. And now these wild things are becoming more widely known. I remember one day we walked into the training session, and it was during the summertime. And John is like, so, Mr. Weidman, today we're going to talk about how can we break Chris Weidman's leg. I'm sitting there like, what? And he's talking about heel hooks. And he's going over it.
You mean Anderson Silva's leg, not Chris Weidman's leg.
Oh, excuse me, Chris Weidman's leg. Yeah.
Anderson Silva's
leg. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And when he says that, I'm sitting there like, whoa, what is he talking about? And this is the first time I'm being introduced into heel hooks. Like I've been there. I have my purple belt, whatever. He starts applying the heel hook on my brother, and I'm watching my brother's face, and there's AC in the room. He starts applying. He's talking about the heel hook, and as soon as he starts applying, my brother's face is like beet red. He's starting to sweat, and it's cold in there. It's cold. He's applying it. I'm just like, oh my God. He's pinching his knees. The application is on point, and I'm sitting there like, oh, okay, so this is very real. And then I remember years later, I ended up getting asked to do a private lesson to be a partner for someone, for John, and he's working on heel hooks again, and he finally applies it on me. And I was like, okay, now I see what the heat is about. Okay, this is horrible, horrible. He didn't even like put real pressure into the heel hook. And John's application for a heel hook is like no other. You shoot me first.
That's one of the things about heel hooks is that there's no barometer for danger, like a choke, or you can kind of feel where you have to fight certain aspects, but a heel hook is 0 to like your knee gets just shredded in such a quick microsecond that I think they're so dangerous. You guys like Paul Harris have just torn and hurt many guys, and guys like Eminari that have been really good at the heel hooks and stuff like that. I think the one issue is like for MMA purposes, if you miss a heel hook, you tend to give up a lot of positional advantage because you have to deal with the legs.
Almost definitely. What kind of game you like?
Whichever one I can sit on the sideline and watch. At this point in my life, it's football games. I've been doing jiu-jitsu since 1995, 96. And,
that's great.
And, so like once I got into, I think I went through like the changes, the ebb and flow. I think once I started doing jiu-jitsu, it was very like uber cool to be Brazilian, and you had the Krugens kimonos and stuff. And then when I started doing MMA, I realized how bad my wrestling was, and that really needed to be a fundamental shift. So I trained less on jiu-jitsu and more on wrestling. If I were to go back now and kind of even push it a step further, it would be more on positional dominance, and instead of looking at things in a macro sense, more of a micro sense, more of in a macro sense. I think when people look at MMA now, they get really caught up on this thing or that thing, and you have to like have a good foundation of many areas. And I think that being on top, whether you're in the street, whether you're in an MMA match, I mean, obviously a judo match typically means you're winning. You don't have to fight with. So I think guys need to work more on sweeps and stuff. So like I've been a big fan of like butterfly guard. Marcelo Garcia is kind of the guy who I've modeled a lot of my jiu-jitsu after. Obviously I've got fingerprints of like Eddie Bravo and Renzo Gracie and a bunch of guys all over him, but Marcelo, because I was never like a really flexible guy that was able to like do all this stuff that Eddie could do, and I wasn't 125 pounds. So Marcelo Garcia didn't have great wrestling, so he was able to deal with a lot of wrestlers. He used butterfly sweeps. He has these crazy, I don't know if you ever get a chance to train with Marcelo, like
No, but I watch a lot of Marcelo videos. He's amazing.
Dude, it's insane. Like, I mean, I roll with high level black belts all the time, and like the ass whooping Marcelo Garcia puts on you is like you've never trained. It's crazy. He's just so dominant, and so he's
so technically sound. Like I don't know how he's able. He has good flexibility in certain ranges, which I don't even know how he does it. Sometimes he places his feet on people's hips and he's just pushing away.
Yeah,
it's just amazing. He knows how to create space. The guy's just, what I will say about being in judo is that it opened my mind to recognize how many different martial arts are implemented into judo, jiu-jitsu, MMA. And I was one track mind for a long time. I just, can you say you like what you like, you like your jiu-jitsu, you like your judo, and that's what you focus on. But I think when you finally start watching MMA, you recognize and you watch MMA with a different eye, like you kind of appreciate the art for what it is. Like I refuse to watch MMA at a bar, to sit there and hear that guy say, "Yo, fuck him up, yo, get up." It's like, you go in there, you go try this shit out, man, because it doesn't work that way. It does not work that way.
People don't understand like how physically taxing some of the things that look so simple are. Like even like working off of a wall for a minute. Like when someone's trying to hold you down or fighting a takedown. Like you're actively fighting someone for. I mean, most street fights are over in a matter of a few seconds, you know, like much less 5 minutes of someone who's been in their peak physical condition to put an ass whooping on you that they've been training for 10 years to do, because they have to, you're literally taking money out of their children's mouths if this fight doesn't go that way.
And the physical capability that these MMA fighters have, you know, I used to say this, where, you know, if the United States could trade 500 soldiers for 250 MMA fighters and then train them how to use a gun, they'd probably take them. These guys they're lethal weapons. You have a lot of guys that are out there now who don't even fight. They aren't even on a promotion. They don't do amateur fights, nothing. But they are very well versed. You know, a good friend of mine, Brian Glick. No one knows that he can strike. He's a Renzo Gracie Black Belt. All right. I put him. This is John Danaher. I put him right under John Danaher, and they were training partners. What can I say? The guy, he can strike. He can do his judo. He has a judo black belt, Jiu Jitsu black belt, and never competed. God forbid if somebody steps to him. Oof, it's going to be a bad day. I've seen him take apart, and this is a guy that's walking around and maybe about 160 pounds. I've seen him in the training session, sat back with John on a regular Monday at Renzo Gracie, and I remember watching this guy, hey, do you want to do a round? And this is a Monday where there's like maybe 60, 70 people on the mat. Guy's about 230, 240, 250, something like that. Comes up to him, hey, can you do a round with me? I was like, yeah, sure. So Brian Glick works with him. The guy chases him, takes him down. He's roughing him up. And that black belt poise that comes in there that says, you know what, I'm going to have my patience. He's going to get tired, and I'm going to find my opening. And Brian Glick starts playing. The guy's playing the drums. He starts tapping everywhere, getting caught in rear naked chokes, getting caught in guillotines, Peruvian neckties. And this is all in under a 5-minute match, or a 5-minute round. And I'm sitting there like, Jesus Christ. And me, I just started training there. So this opened my eyes to want to stick around and being at Renzo Gracie for that long. So, because I walked in that place, holy moly, it was a bunch of killers. I remember the first 2 training sessions I was there. I remember seeing Frankie Edgar, Edson Barbosa, Chris Weidman, George St. Pierre, and I'm just like, I watch these guys on television, and these guys are busting their ass over here. Like, okay, I get it. This is the place I need to be. So I was sold.
When you look at guys like that trained, and if they're training judo, are there 2 or 3 specific throws that you think are more effective for MMA or no-gi than others?
I do. There are quite a few techniques. What I prefer, for me specifically, when I work with any MMA fighters, if it was Chris Weidman or if it was George St. Pierre or David Branch, one of the guys, like what I usually like to implement is foot sweeps. Foot sweeps are amazing. They're efficient. You don't have to lift up. It's not weight bearing. You can just get someone moving into a certain direction and they'll go for a ride. And it doesn't matter how big they are. You just got to get them to follow you. So, you have that inside leg trips. I remember watching Henry Cejudo hit it multiple times on Demetrius Johnson. You see Kayla and Rhonda, and they do it quite often. And like I said, you don't need to lift them off the ground. You just need to be able to get them to move in a certain direction, and you'll find you'll find your window of opportunity eventually.
And what was it? Lyoto Machida made the foot sweep popular, man. He has a karate background, but he was foot sweeping people all over the place. I think that it's always like when you see a power double leg, like you kind of know that there's a certain level of finesse, but also there's some brute force that are employed in those moves. Foot sweeps are just so nice because there's nothing more satisfying than when you just turn a guy a few inches and you foot sweep him and he goes flying across a room. That's the most beautiful like highlight or like way to like talk about judo, right? It's like they talk about minimal effort for maximum result.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I have my students over here, and when they see a foot sweep, they be like, man, that guy must feel stupid. He got hit with a foot sweep. I don't think people realize how long it takes to actually master a foot sweep. And that's even as an instructor, I'm still working on foot sweeps. And a lot of the guys I've worked with from Gordon and Garry, who I got lucky enough to show them, foot sweeps. These guys, they use it in their game all the time, actually. I used to use it on Gary Tonin. I'll probably laugh about this, but I used to use it on Gary Tonin often when we would do MMA sparring, because it was a good range finder, just like a jab. You understand exactly how far they are. It might stumble them, and they'll leave you open for another one quick strike, or give you an opportunity to create some space. But I actually, when I competed at the Olympic trials, I lost by a foot sweep. To master a foot sweep, man, there's something glorious about it. Something that's I think who hit it? I think Hector Lombard hit Jake Shields with a foot sweep, and he went flying. And Joe Rogan was like, "What the hell was that?" Like, to sit there and watch foot sweeps, I still get astonished by it.
Was there ever a point where you thought about maybe making the transition to grappling full time, just because you see guys like Gordon Ryan, the ADCCs, and guys are making like some serious cheddar in the no-gi grappling game?
Not so much, honestly. I've had a lot of time to think about where my career as a judo player was, and of course, I honestly would, if the right money was thrown at me and my body could hold up, I'd probably still be competing in judo, honestly. But something that kind of drove me back to wanting to teach and do judo again. Like, now that I have my own school in Kano martial arts in Manhattan, and it's not too far from Renzo Gracie, and I grew up having a perspective on life that kind of changed the way I think. And I've watched a lot of interesting things happen around me, from people passing away to people having accidents and having, whatever it was. And now I'm in a position that I can give it back, like I can help people out, So, like, we just finished doing a food drive not too long ago. We're going to do a Toys for Tots for kids in December. Like, it's just, things have changed, I'm not the same guy like I once was. I used to love competing. I still do. Every once in a while, like, my plan is to actually try and compete with my students one day soon. Pick a competition. I'll compete with them as well. And it's been good. But when I see the level of competition right now, I know that I have a lot to make up for. And maybe one day I'll change my mind. I'm only 36, and I believe even at this age, I still feel like I'm young.
When you say competition, do you mean a judo competition or more of just a no-gi grappling competition, or
Both.
grappling?
Both. Yeah.
Both?
Both. Yeah. I would love to. I still have yet to compete in a black belt competition for Jiu Jitsu. So I actually would love to do that one day soon. So.
Do you think if you just go and compete as a black belt, you can just game the system a little bit and just keep throwing guys and win by points? Like how the old wrestlers won ADCC, they just kind of take you down and hold you there, like the old UFC fights.
I'm actually very proud of what I've learned under John Danaher. So I would love to just submit one of the best guys in the world. Like, I don't care for the standing. I will purpose that's like what you asked me earlier. Were you just walking in and just taking everyone down? I think halfway through the training sessions, I would find myself pulling guard or let someone take me down just so I could play off my back, because I was so used to taking people down. I was always in top position. Mm-hmm. So, and sometimes people would even like, I'm not staying with this guy. They would start sitting to their butt immediately, and I'm sitting there trying to work to get past their guard. So now I let people work. I let them work. I want to improve on my weakness. All right. So I think that's part of being a martial artist. I don't know.
If someone's doing jiu-jitsu and they have like one day a week to train judo, what's the one move, if they're doing gi, and is it the same aside of a foot sweep, that they should focus on that's like a really high percentage takedown to really help a jiu-jitsu guy's judo career, or vice versa? Jiu-jitsu guys get better at judo for their jiu-jitsu career.
I for some weird reason I still like Osoto Gary. That was my first technique. It's a outside leg trip, and when you throw one, they're falling flat on their back eventually. All right. I mean, and if you do it correctly, there you might even knock them out. I have this method. I like to call it the oh shit method. So when you
Elaborate.
throw, yeah, when you throw, the first thing that goes through their mind after you've thrown and with full authority, they say, "Oh shit!" And while they're gathering up their life, they're trying to figure out what's next. You're already transitioning into your next technique. So if you're doing it correctly, you end up in side control, or even in, you might even end up in knee on belly. There's so many different things that you might do properly, you know. So I think that's a good one to do for judo, jiu-jitsu, MMA as well. You know, you always end up in a very good position because you're always on the outside.
One of the things Gary Tonin talked about when he transitioned into MMA was how he neglected in the beginning that he didn't really have any work off of a cage, and that fence and that cage really is a whole different scenario. Did you ever find that when you started training judo or jiu-jitsu, like working off a wall, certain techniques, and how did you have to adjust your game?
Actually, it was actually easier. I felt, yeah, because now they weren't running around; they stayed right there. So some people didn't, you know, whenever I would work inside the cage with anyone, there wasn't enough pummeling, you know. So they would get into certain positions, and I was like, "Thanks, whatever you want." You know, I'd pull people off the cage, hit an inside leg trip, you know, hit a foot sweep on the inside as well. You know, you see these things, these opportunities. Judo's so dynamic in the open mat or in the center of a cage. But if you manage to isolate them against a cage, it actually makes it quite easy. You just gotta make sure your hands in the right position, head positioning. You know, it makes it that much easier. So, you know, I could see how Garry Tonin, you know, he's implemented so much of it. You know, whether it's a double leg takedown with an inside leg trip. You know, he's so dynamic. He has a great mind for all arts, honestly. You know, and I still don't even understand how Danaher managed to be the only striking coach, the only MMA coach for him, and they got a good chemistry, man. You can't reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, you know, you can speak on this because I just had a roundtable with some jiu-jitsu guys. And one of the things we talked about is because judo obviously is an Olympic sport and has been for many years. Jiu-jitsu hasn't made it to the Olympics. Why do you think that is?
Um, I think there's a lot of money there's in jiu-jitsu, and I think if they truly decided to jump into the Olympics, they would lose a lot of money because I think the marketing in jiu-jitsu is phenomenal. You know, when you look at Fight to Win, you look at IBJJF, you know, you look at where they're bringing all these, you know, you're bringing all these competitions into different parts of the world. They figured it out. Judo is an Olympic sport because it's been like that for such a long time. I believe 1964, and you know, the sport itself it's an old sport, but what it is about the reason why judo could maintain is because, well, when you watch judo from, you know, let's say you're Joe Schmo off the street and you watch judo and you see somebody get thrown, you can be like, oh wow. But if you're watching jujitsu, not everybody has that wow factor. You see it on the ground. You want to, from my eye, I look at it, I see art. From another person's eye, they see two people rolling around in pajamas. And sometimes it could be a little bit boring. But I appreciate that. I appreciate the technical aspect of jujitsu. I don't know if that's going to help them, you know, present in a way that, you know, it could be finally in the Olympics, but it takes time. You know, I think there's a couple of rule changes that need to be done. There's many different rule sets that are implemented, you know, gi and then no gi. So you don't have to worry about that in judo. They stick to one rule set all the time. They're constantly changing. Don't get me wrong, but you know, they found a way. They found a way to make it work.
Are the Japanese just constantly the most dominant team in judo in the Olympics?
I wouldn't say the most. They're pretty up there. They're pretty up there, but they've definitely have they're in for a wild ride for these next couple of years, because I believe the next one is going to be in Paris in 2024, and you know, the French judo players are amazing. Like, what can I say? Those guys, whew, you know, they open up and they have many different styles, and they're some of the clips that I've seen recently are they have a lot of the French judo players cross training, doing MMA, doing jujitsu, and and it's not just like random people. We're talking about the cream of the crop judo players from France, and they're starting to implement it into their game. So I'm seeing Peruvian neckties. I'm seeing people punching grips like they're throwing combinations. What can I say? Those guys they're gonna be a big problem for those for the Japanese players in Paris in 2024. So I have my pick on them.
It's one thing you don't really hear about it because, you know, you look at jiu-jitsu, how it's kind of changed, especially since Danaher has taken the forefront, and a lot of the guys that have had this stage, like the EBI Invitational and Fight to Win, ADCC, you see the evolution of jiu-jitsu. I think we can arguably say that jiu-jitsu today is light years ahead of where it was 10 years ago, which is light years ahead of where it was 10 years prior. Do you see that same growth in judo, or is judo, because it's more of a traditional martial art, more confined to the paradigm of the box that we train in already?
No, I think I see some serious evolution. You know, you have a lot of these, a lot of the athletes are so dynamic in judo, and I think it's only right that when you look at martial arts, there has to be an evolution. There's a constant evolution that's happening, and if you're gonna be an instructor and be confined to those spaces and thinking that, oh, you know, this is wrong, or this is wrong, this is wrong, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. You're actually doing your students a disservice by not teaching the stuff, you know? Like, even for me as an instructor, I still go to instructionals, or I might go to a seminar, see what's the flavor of the month, you know? Like, you can't really do those, you can't put yourself in a box. You really can't, you know? I think that the sport of judo is gonna evolve even more over time, because they got rid of leg grabs. Cool. Now, when you look at judo, it's even more dynamic. So people have no choice but to stand up. The balance is different. The training is different. You know, you look at basketball players back then and basketball players now. The basketball players now will wreck these basketball players back then. You know, they're huge. I remember being at the Olympics and seeing Dwight Howard and LeBron James. Those guys are built like houses. And they're big guys walking around like close to 300 pounds, moving fast, you know, with muscles, flat stomachs. I'm just like, I can't believe they made you.
Right. Like, what factory did you come out of?
Yeah.
What are they feeding you guys? Jesus.
Yeah.
Just put them in a room. Just breed them to make more basketball players. Just
It's insane. It's insane. And you know, when you look at judo players and you look at jiu-jitsu players, they're the same thing. You know, you look at a Gordon Ryan, you look at a Nicky Rod. These guys, you know, and you see a guy like Nicky Rod. I think you just had him not too long ago on your show. Like, come on, the guy's been around for what, 3 years, 4 years, sitting there giving people that have been doing jiu-jitsu for as long they've been black belts longer than he's been alive.
Yeah,
You know,
he's crazy.
yeah.
He said he did his first jiu-jitsu tournament after doing jiu-jitsu for 3 weeks. He was just wrecking black belts. And,
Oh, yeah.
and I totally, and usually if someone said that, I wouldn't buy that, but that, like, Nicky, I guarantee, I mean, he's so dominant in
Yeah.
like his wrestling and I think as people get better at being more athletic, you know, like we saw, like John Jones was one of the first guys that came into the UFC that was just a really good athlete. John Jones is a guy that could have played college football, like his brother could have played, baseball, basketball, super athletic. And once you add those intangibles, the athleticism and stuff to the sport, that's really where you start to exponentially see growth, because you've got to deal with guys now that are not only technically proficient, but have crazy gas tanks, amazing flexibility, can punch you from 83 inches away. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, you know, and not just that too, but I believe having the right surrounding in an environment, whether you're in wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, it goes a long way. The kids' mentality is insane, and that's all of them. That's really all of them. You know, that whole group of guys that came out of Danaher. You know, a guy like Nicky Rod, who in his own mind, he had a wrestler's mentality. I always believe that even as wrestler, when you look at wrestlers, you know, judo players have it too, but wrestlers, you to go tell this wrestler, hey, do me a favor, go move this building. He's gonna try. He has that mentality. And you look at a guy like Jordan Burroughs, these guys, they have a go button like nobody's business.
Yeah.
And
that's what I think it
that's scary.
translates so well to MMA. Those guys, because jiu-jitsu we've talked about can be lazy. It can be a butt scooting, flopping your back. You know, it's not. It was designed by these Brazilians who were smaller framed and back in the day, but wrestlers, judo guys, people that have that forward drive, they do so well because of that, and they chain together moves.
Yeah, and when you think about it, it's all about mentality. That mentality is that killer mentality sits there and it'll breed like ridiculous amount of energy. You know, okay, you know what? I'm down, but I'm not out. They're still going, still going, still going, still going, still going. You know, when you sit there and you watch some of the best MMA fighters, you know, they manage to pull wins out of their asses like nobody's business. Like what's his name? Was the Menace? No, Eklund. He had that one match. I can't remember. He had a match not too long ago. He's from Alpha Male, and he was losing the match from a guy from I think Bosnia, and he was bloodied up. He has a big tattoo across, blood covered everywhere. He's losing the first 2 rounds, but he was a wrestler. He truly believed in his mind that he was going to win that match, and I think he had like the comeback of the year type of thing going on, and you know that's almost every wrestler I've seen in the UFC. They managed to bulldoze over some jiu-jitsu guys because they have the mentality that says, you know what, I'm just going to keep on punching this guy in the face. I may not submit him, but he's not going to submit me if I'm giving him this much trouble.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's infinitely easier to teach people to avoid submissions when you're hot, sweaty, and you've got good cardio than it is to really secure submissions. Like if you had 3 years to train, and my thought is you did 2 years and 9 months on wrestling and then 4 or 5 months on jujitsu, you're probably going to be better served than the opposite of that.
yeah, like you see scenarios like Rodolfo Vieira when he was in the UFC. You know, the guy, world class jiu-jitsu. You know, unfortunately, he met a guy that kind of had just a little bit of jiu-jitsu, and he made his adjustment later on in the next match. But in this particular match, I remember him going for a submission and arms faded out first round. You know, the jiu-jitsu wasn't there for him. You know, and I think that's what I think that's the beauty of MMA. The
Yeah.
beauty of MMA is that you have multiple arts there. You can make them work for yourself. And once it gets sweaty, it gets a little bit tricky. So you got to figure this out.
It is. It's just like when you go from gi to no gi. Like you lose some of your grips. It's similar, but it's not. It's like a cousin. It's not as parallelly. That's a new word. It's not as direct of a parallel. Just like when you go from no gi to MMA, you've got. I mean, like you look at Marcelo Garcia. First of all, I mean you have limited dexterity because of your hands, but Marcelo Garcia, who was up until Gordon Ryan, probably arguably the most elite grappler of our generation. And he got into MMA because, like most people were, they were lured by, well, there wasn't a tremendous amount of money in grappling. So come do some fights and we're going to pay you a bunch of money. And he had a very mixed success. I think he went 1-1 in MMA and then quit, and that's a guy who he didn't directly translate that's directly over. I've always thought, like, out of the DDS guys, like I asked Nicky Rod this, just because Nicky has that tenacity and that drive and that wrestling background, and he's a super athlete. I always thought if Nicky ever did MMA, he would have a really high ceiling.
Yeah, most definitely. He's, it's never to knock any of their accomplishments, but there just comes a grit and tenacity that comes with MMA that if you manage to incorporate that into other sports, whew, man. Yeah,
Imagine
like,
if tennis players, golf. Imagine if golf players trained with the intensity of MMA players. I'd watch golf.
Oh my god. Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. You know, and you know, I would love to see Jordan Burroughs get into MMA.
Yeah.
You know,
I think he said he's going to do one fight. He said he's going to do one fight. I think.
Yeah.
That's like the just try a little bit. That's like Dana White being a drug dealer. Just have a little bit. This first one's on me. You know, right. Like one fight. What's gonna happen? He's gonna murder somebody, get some money, and go, well, maybe one more fight.
Yep. Dana White's sitting on the other side, writes on a napkin, slides it to him.
Yeah.
What do you think?
He just writes zeros on the napkin and then puts a number in front of it. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. Jordan Burroughs would be amazing too. Like, you know, there's been guys like Ben Askren and stuff that did that, and even guys before that, like Matt Hughes, who the biggest knock I think on wrestlers is that they had a really hard time putting together their hands, because judo, you're more upright. You're not really sitting in that super low position. Judo guys, you know, can put their hands together, strikers, grapplers, but like wrestlers, I think they're so used to that setting up that shot. And then they don't see their wrestling pay the dividends that they normally would until they get their hands together. Because I mean, and you probably speak of this in judo, it's not necessarily that first technique you throw, it's that reshoot or that second or third, you get them to move their balance. And then it's the balance the other way that sets guys up.
Yes, most definitely. It's, you know, you're going to need a couple of swings at the tree before it goes down. Yeah. And, you know, and I think you're right about that, you know, trying to put together the hands to make it work for you, especially when you already have just a ground game. You're a monster in the ground game, but you're sitting there going like this, you don't feel like you're close enough, or you start reaching. Yeah. You know, I think, and that could be oh my God, you become gun shy, you know, and especially if you got knocked out and then you want to try and do an MMA fight again, now you want to close the distance even more.
Yeah, you start going back to the old hoist thing where you get your hands over here like this and you're just like holding out in front.
Throwing kicks to the leg, and then hopefully you get entering onto a leg.
Or you turn into Vitor Belfort in like his first UFC, where he just sprints across the cage, throwing jabs and crosses until he forces the clinch. Just overwhelming. But well, hey man, I appreciate you you taking the time today. It was very interesting, and we'll get all this stuff put together. And where's you're on Instagram most, right? Like, we'll tag your IG and all that good stuff, man. You get anything coming up here? Any seminars or anything down in the Florida area? Any competitions or anything?
Well, right now, as of coming up right now, we have a Toys for Tots drive coming up. We have an open mat going on in New York City. Hopefully people can make that out. That'll be next week. And you know, I also have my the next Judo Fanatics / BJJ Fanatics instructional coming out.
Huge honor for me. Yeah, guys, huge honor. I love.
I know, right? It's funny. I used to give Bernardo judo private lessons too.
Really?
Like, yeah, long time ago.
You're in a great niche though, because like there's so much competition for like what's the next good you know, like grappling thing. Like there's 1,000 guys that are ADCC medalists or that have done well that are showed there, but like there's not a really tremendous amount of judo guys that are high level. No. It's like it's almost like they want to keep to themselves, you know, like, you know, that's a little selfish. Not sharing the love. They're like, we don't want these Brazilians to know how to take us down. We're gonna throw them on their heads and run away.
Oh my God, yeah.
But cool, man.
But it was a pleasure. You know, thank you so much. You know, looking forward to seeing this out.
For sure.
Good luck with everything, man. I love what you're doing. Keep it up, man. It looks great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it. You ever make it down this way, let me know. I got you for a beer, or if you don't drink, whatever else you have.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much.